Welcome to Uncanny X-Minutes, where we bring you the comics behind the movies. I'm Stasha.
I'm producer James.
And we're here to talk about X2, X-Men United, minutes 50 through 60.
Ooh, getting to the 1 hour mark.
Yeah. James, what happens?
Iceman goes home and quote-unquote comes out to his parents. Magneto escapes from plastic prison. And Nightcrawler and Storm have a heart-to-heart.
Yeah. Sweet.
We're not going to talk about the heart-to-heart, but
No.
it's one of those types of scenes that you're like, oh, this could be so much more if they went comic accurate. There's so much history there,
Yeah.
like, between those characters who, at this point, just met.
I think we've said this before, that Rogue is the stand-in for Kitty Pryde. And there was so much of Kitty Pryde and her prejudice against Nightcrawler, who looked scary because she was a kid. And like, even if you took that storyline instead of Rogue's actual storyline from the comics, that would also be a lot more to mine. They didn't do either of those things.
And this is because when you read some X books, the Institute is just full of non-human looking mutants.
Yes.
And then there's other times where it's like the movies where it's just like, oh, they're mostly just with just the smattering of weird looking people.
I think that there was a pretty large shift after the New Mutants. Once we start getting into the more modern eras of X-Men. Yeah. Glob Herman, honestly, kind of in this era, the 2001 Grant Morrison run, that's when you start getting the secondary mutations, right? And you get more mutants that can't pass, because usually the mutants that couldn't pass were Morlocks, and they got banished to the sewers,
right? Which is funny to think now.
This is actually kind of what we're going to talk about today. I think part of the reason is that the turning point was in the Grant Morrison run, is because that is when the Xavier Institute is outed as being a mutant institute. So after the last 10 minutes, when the school was being stormed, students are escaping, and as we talk about, they go to Bobby Drake's house, Iceman's house, but on the news they're talking about underground mutant organizations, aka the school.
Real culty vibe.
Yeah.
If you're going to say underground mutant organization.
It does.
Yikes.
It does.
This older bald man has been amassing weapons of mass destruction under the guise of a school. So, yes. And honestly, that is what's in the Grant Morrison run, too. The 2001 Morrison. It's similar time period. The school. I think it's before this one, because this is 2003.
This is 2003. So,
I think Morrison is 01.
Is 01, for sure.
Around there.
Yeah, I know the comic for sure. The movies, I'm always fuzzy on the dates. Early 2000s. In that run, there are huge protesters outside because in the middle of the run, Professor Xavier goes on TV and confesses to the fact that they're all mutants, etc., etc. Except he's not at the school, and so who's dealing with the fallout? Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Emma Frost. It's really interesting because you have all of the protesters kind of framing it the same way that you see it on TV in the movie, where it's is it or is it not true that you guys are a militia? And it is framing the students as an army in that run, or at least the people believe they're an army, versus
that's what the news is saying.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the protesters are, until Emma Frost hits them with a bliss bomb in their brain.
That's how it
really
worded it.
Fun. Yeah, and she says they'll be really embarrassed about themselves when they wake up and they'll disperse. And she just leaves.
The way she handles situations sometimes I adore.
I agree.
Because she's just I'm not dealing with this.
I
don't need to argue with you people.
Right. There's a directness to it that I really appreciate. She's a problem solver, and she's been equipped with a brain hammer, and everything's a nail, and that's okay with her.
Yeah. Guess who doesn't have psi shields? Yeah. Normal people.
Yeah. So that's kind of the turning point. It was a lot later than I thought when I was doing the research.
I was going to say, I would have assumed it was earlier, but no.
It's 2001.
It's tough though, because in those first couple of Silver Age comics, they're working with the military, but they're all masked though.
Right.
But they are dealing with Professor X specifically. It's a weird, and he's not masked.
Yeah. I've said,
a little hand waving.
Everything kind of before, and also like you could hand wave it into like, oh, this is like the Val Cooper equivalents, like these kind of high level military people that know but don't tell, like the general populace doesn't.
I mean, you also can you just tell them they don't know me anymore.
That's also very true. That is
like,
also.
What do I need to wear a mask for? I am wearing a mask. You're done.
Yeah.
There's actually a 1-page comic of Emma Frost. And she needs to go out and all her clothes are dirty. And she's like, what do I care? And then she goes out in her like shorts and t-shirt, but everyone sees like an elegant outfit. And that's all. It's just 1 page. And I, for some reason, stuck with me.
It's one of my favorites. I love that page because I would absolutely do that if I had the ability.
Of course you
to.
would.
Right. And then I could just walk around in my pajamas and I don't actually have to be in these uncomfortable clothing. Yeah, that's perfect. Anyway.
The more important set of scenes that I think need to be highlighted is both Iceman and Iceman's relationship with his parents.
Yes.
Because I remember watching this and being like, man, his parents are real kind. They're not total jerks, but they're also not supportive of him. His brother's the one that's a jerk. And if I recall, he doesn't have a brother.
No.
In any of these comics. So they needed someone to be the bad guy. It should totally have been either his mom or his dad.
It really should have been. But they were softballing it.
They were softballing it.
Yeah, the purifiers and the parents both got softballed in this movie.
His parents are the worst in the most realistic way possible.
Yeah.
Not even counting the mutant aspect of anything. It's more of like how they treat him in his everyday, how he's chosen to live his life.
Yeah.
They want him to settle down. Not in Boston. I think it's Boston in the movie.
Yeah, it's not.
It's Long Island.
Yeah.
They want him to settle down and become an accountant.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't even want to be an accountant. Like that, but short of anything else, I don't want to do that. And they pressure him big time to do that. And then they guilt him about being an X-Man.
Yeah.
And that's all he can talk about. And that's all his life is. And they're like, can't you do anything else?
In the comics, there are like several, like over decades, honestly, there are several scenes of Iceman coming home to have dinner with his parents and then basically getting into a fight every single time because his parents are like, can we talk about normal stuff? And he's like, my only normal things that would qualify are basically these dinners and it's when like I go to the
barista,
coffee.
The barista at the coffee shop. That's it.
Because he's an X-Man. And it's like,
it's really funny watching him tell a story as if, it's like, oh, what happened in your day? And he's just like, oh, my powers went on the fritz because of this, that, and the other thing. But then we were he's like, no, we're not talking about this. Like he gets interrupted and is like, stop it.
Yeah. There's, his parents are worse than I think people remember sometimes. Yeah. A lot of the other X-Men have worse, quote unquote, relationships with their parents in that a lot of them, they don't talk to them anymore.
Right, exactly.
They've been cast away from their homes. You could argue that, like, well, Bobby Drake kind of has a better one because he still goes to have dinner occasionally with them.
He's still in like minimal contact with them.
But it's almost worse in a way because, like, every time you read those comics, like, it just feels like psychological damage. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Like,
I was reading I feel bad. I read the 1984 Iceman mini. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, let's see how his parents are. Oh, they're pretty bad. And then that whole mini is about Bobby actually realizing his parents maybe, like, it softens his parents up to him a little. Mm-hmm. He realizes that, like, he Back to the Futures. Okay. He goes back to the 1950s and sees who they were as kids. Okay. And then his dad dies.
Okay.
His dad dies due to some creature that gets thrown at him. And then Iceman basically gets blinked out of existence, essentially, and Oblivion, like the personified character of Oblivion, brings him back.
Oh.
And then it's this weird, like, it's trippy. It's one of those things like, we'll never talk about this again because it's too much.
Yeah. And his dad dies at another point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It gets undone by the end of the mini, but, like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Obviously, because his dad shows up later.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's crazy.
That's kind of been the MO for the Bobby Drake family, where his parents get They come off really badly and they soften up a little bit just in time for them to come off really badly the next time that he runs into them.
They never learn.
No.
I think they're trying to, because now his dad's out of the picture because he died. I think they're trying to soften up his mom in the most recent Astonishing Iceman series, where it seems like she's just, their relationship is now fine.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It was tough because so in the...
I didn't know there's a problem. I read that one first and was like, oh yeah, see, their relationship's fine. It's fine.
It was pretty
and then I
funny.
went back and went, no, it's not.
James was talking to me because we had watched the movie clip, and you're like, oh, well, I think in the newest ones, his mom is actually really nice. And I was like, we got to read all of it, all the background, because there's so much. So in Uncanny X-Men 319, this is when Iceman brings Rogue home as a friend, while she's struggling with Gambit's, finding out Gambit has a wife.
Whoops.
Leaving that alone. And Iceman is there to kind of just talk to his parents again. His parents are also portrayed not only as bigots, Rogue ends this dinner by calling his dad a bigot or whatever at the end of it. But also there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment about...
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Iceman, and even issues earlier to this, because Iceman brings Opal Tanaka, which is his girlfriend at the time, home, and they talk about how she isn't good enough for him because of her race. And it's bad. And obviously it creates this big, huge friction. And that's why he doesn't talk to them all the time. And it's this very complicated thing. It's brought up again when Rogue comes home because his dad asks, why can't you bring any normal girls home? It sets off a whole
what's
thing.
Wrong with Rogue? Because she's a mutant.
Because she's a mutant. So...
well, you did bring one home and you didn't like her.
Right. So that was a really bad note. But in Uncanny X-Men 340, about 21 issues later, his dad is in the hospital because he's been beaten almost to death by Graydon Creed's goons. Jeez. And it's because he's standing up for mutants during the news report, Trish's news report, talking about mutants. And this is about to go into Operation Zero Tolerance. This is when Graydon Creed is running for president on an anti-mutant platform. And his goons are on the streets, beating up people who are standing up for mutants. And his dad ends up in the hospital. And there's multiple scenes between Iceman and Storm and talking about well, his dad must really love him because there's no other reason for him to do this. And Iceman doesn't understand why he would risk himself. So there's a softening there.
Okay.
It goes back and forth though.
Yeah.
Because... did you read the issues of Iceman standalone in 2017?
I did.
So that's
where it came right back.
Yes. So this is what I mean, these up and downs, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Well, and it's funny because that segment, it gets compounded by one of the other big things that happens in Iceman's life, which is, we've talked before about the time displaced X-Men. They come up again. They do. So... it turns out that Jean Grey didn't have her telepathy in the early Silver Age comics. When she came to the modern age, it exploded in her head. All of a sudden, she has these telepathic powers. She reads Bobby's mind and goes, oh, by the way, she pulls him off the side and goes, hey, you're gay. And he's like, no, I'm not. He's total denial. No, I'm not. It's no, it's fine. You don't have to pretend anymore. I'm here for it. It's okay. It's all fine. And it turns out that Iceman this entire time has been gay and a mutant. And because he was essentially two different minorities, the one that he could control was being gay, quote unquote control, the thing that he could control the perception of. Hide. Is that. So why not just pretend essentially and just focus more on the superheroing, which, I mean, if you read about his exploits throughout the years, it's tricky because he is chasing after girls, and it's almost he's you read it now as he's trying too hard. Yeah,
I think it works. You could definitely interpret it that way. So because his relationships never last either.
Right. So that was in All New X-Men number 40, and then we skip to Uncanny X-Men number 600, where the two of them confront older Bobby that he's gay.
Which, by the way, older Bobby cannot stand younger Bobby. And honestly, Though that interaction is probably my favorite thing about the time displaced X-Men is like the self-hatred that Bobby Drake has that just reflected in his younger self. It's incredibly funny.
It's amazing. So they have to have a heart with him that's like, no, it's fine. We get it. Like, I'm you and I'm willing to embrace this.
Yeah.
Younger Bobby's willing to embrace it while older Bobby's still trying to like push it down. And it does end up with older Bobby being like, you know what? I am gay.
Yeah.
It's fine. So now you have issues like the 2017 solo series where it is him trying to come to terms with being gay. And part of that is with his parents, with his teammates. It's really something.
Yeah. His parents don't take it well.
No, they don't.
It's really bad. Both his mom and his dad, because usually his mom was kind of like, she was a bad guy too, but she was more of like, she had bad beliefs, but still trying to keep the peace, where his dad was very like gruff. But I think his mom almost gets the rougher end.
I think she gets worse.
Yeah, she gets worse here.
Honestly, it almost is the cliche of like, well, now you can't give me grandbabies.
They literally say that. Yeah.
But I think that's why she takes it harder than the dad does.
Yeah.
Well, their names are William and Madeline. We could use their names,
but we don't care.
Madeline's hard to throw around a bunch.
And also there's already a Madeline Pryor who's way more important.
Right. So let's not say Madeline a bunch. Anyway, one of my favorites though, there is an issue of this Iceman solo series where his mom realizes there's two Icemen running around. Like, they never told her that a younger version of her son is in the present day. And so she calls up older Bobby and is like, hey, could we all sit down for dinner? And so there is a dinner scene with his parents and both older and younger Bobby. And younger Bobby is so freaked out, he turns to ice, like literally turns to ice before sitting down for dinner.
I also remember that the older Bobby gets upset because his parents seem to have more preferential treatment towards younger Bobby.
It's even better than that.
Yeah.
They kind of want younger Bobby to move back in with them so that they can kind of get a second try.
Oh, no.
At raising him well. So it starts, the dinner starts great. Like, everyone's excited. Oh, we're all here together. And then it slowly disintegrates into, oh, we see what you're doing here.
Yeah.
And so they both Icemen leave, like, kind of mad at their parents, understandably. I thought this was like, oh, this is the point where we can see everyone getting along. No, it doesn't.
Those dinners never end well.
No, they don't.
Part of the reason so I think that's when Bobby is originally planning on telling his parents that he's gay. After talking to Kitty Pryde, this is the standalone comic 2017, he kind of comes to the conclusion originally that he was going to send them a letter. Kitty Pryde makes the crazy large error of inviting his parents to, I think it's Gray Malkin Industries in San Francisco at the time. I don't think it's actually the Xavier Institute.
Yeah, it's hard to say because the Institute's, I think, in Central Park at this point. But that's, I think, is that an X-Men Gold or is that an Iceman? Now I can't remember. I
don't know. It gets a little fuzzy. Yeah. I can't remember exactly where they bring
Doesn't really matter. They come to wherever Bobby is.
Right. And then that's when, the thing, he just kind of, the last issue of, I think, number 2 is him confessing. He just says, I'm gay. It's like a wide-eyed staring off the panel right into the reader's eyes. And then you get the next issue.
Yeah.
It's like I like that run. I actually thought it was really cute. I thought it was really fun. I mean, it was pretty. It ends with the dad saying that, like, we love you anyway, because he reads the letter eventually. Right. Kitty Pryde gets it to him, proving that Bobby Drake was kind of right and that this is better handled in text than
basically.
Because it seems like they always fight when they're in person.
I think it's this situation where his parents react too quickly all the time, and then they stick to their guns. And
I think they're both reactive.
I guess he probably does
because
too.
Because they are saying really offensive things right off the cuff.
Sure.
But they're also shocked and like don't have time to process, and so they are not perfect in their responses. And he immediately gets hurt, validly so, by their immediate reactions.
Right.
So It spirals.
There's an interesting set of panels in this solos. I just apparently read a bunch of this solo series. I
really
couldn't
good.
stop reading stuff from this series because it has a lot to do with who he is and where he comes from and the current version of him, even though this is all after this movie. In this movie, there is a line that's like, have you ever thought about not being a mutant?
Yes.
And awesome line. Amazing line. There is kind of a thing in that in his backstory. Like, he is meeting with a priest to essentially pray the mutant away.
Oh.
It's like he hasn't been praying hard enough, and he hasn't been working hard enough at not being a mutant, but it feels good for him to use his powers, essentially.
Okay.
And it's exactly this thing. It adds to all of the, he's repressed sexually. He's, he's kind of ashamed of being a mutant, but he can't be a human. Like, he's kind of caught between both. Yeah. He can't be himself.
Right. And I also think that the parents' reactions kind of, they vary through the years too, because like sometimes it's like you mentioned where it's like, it's this kind of allegory, right? Of like, why can't you just be normal or whatever? Yeah. But then there's also the other part of it where they're like, well, if saving the world is so important, why aren't you a firefighter? Where's your 401k? Yeah, right. Like, it's like, there's a little bit of that original kind of accountant through line from like early X-Men that they kind of bring in, but has shifted over time to be a little bit more, it's a little bit more than just not becoming a doctor like your parents wanted you to, right? Yeah. It shifts into literal outright bigotry and,
And it's tough because there are a lot of scenes where, he's just hanging out with his parents and somebody attacks.
That happens a lot. The purifiers in particular raid his house.
It's like, I get it. It is following him around, but it's not going to stop because he becomes an accountant.
Right.
Maybe not as much, but still.
Well, it's too late. And then, but then you see his dad standing up for him, and he has this conversation with Gambit in the hospital where he's like, he's asking Gambit, you're like my son. You could pretend to be human and you're good looking. You could just pass. Like, why don't you? And Gambit says to his dad, the same reason that you could have just let it pass and not stand up for your son and what put you in this hospital. It just wasn't right. Yeah. So like sometimes they get it. It's so, his parents, I think you can interpret it as unrealistic in that every writer wants a chance at writing this, but I think in some ways it is realistic, as your parents are, they have these very strict expectations and you're trying to meet in the middle, and as they are trying to accept it, they stumble, and then you get into a fight, and then you push it a little bit further next time, and then you stumble and you get into another fight, and then you try to push it a little bit further.
I think the fact that they all react quickly is what a lot of that is, where it's like, you know what, let's sit down, let's figure it out. Yeah. But then everything gets heated. Right. And you're kind of back where you started. Right. And everyone comes in good faith. Right. And then leave angry. Right. Every single time. Right. The only conclusion to that is that his dad dies. Right. Was it like a heart attack? Is that what it was? It's tough because it's in like an Infinity comic, weirdly enough. Yeah. So it's essentially off panel. It's not even in like a main book. So when you're reading Astonishing Iceman, you're like, wait, his dad died? Right. I don't know. I guess he's fine with his mom now.
Well, they have this like meeting in the, like by the bedside. Yeah. It's this really sad, like kind of white silhouetted panel shot. But I can't trust it because we've seen that his parents might seem fine and okay, but then they come back and it's not, right.
As I was doing research, there's one thing that maybe you can answer for me. I've got like half of a bit of research that I did. Okay. So apparently he had a secondary mutation.
Oh, the
Iceman did.
Okay, the old man. Oh, the turning into.
Yeah. So like in Uncanny X-Men number 413, he gets stabbed by Black Tom, and the wound turns to ice and will not turn back. And as that run goes on, his chest starts turning more and more into ice, and it won't turn back, and it becomes a bit of drama about him not being able to pass anymore, essentially. Okay. Like, he's worried that he is going to be all ice and never human, and everyone's going to always know he's a mutant. Right. And it ends with him getting shattered for the first time, which at that point never happened. Like his body literally gets hit by an arrow and explodes.
And you think he dies.
Into ice, and then he's just a head.
Yeah.
And the only way he reforms his body is by taking the moisture out of a villain and then recorporealizing, essentially.
Yes.
The research that I was doing said he turned to ice and couldn't turn back, but I never heard again how he turned back into a human.
Okay, so it's a control over his power thing.
So it's not really a secondary mutation.
It's not real. Maybe it's officially considered is, but I've never interpreted it that way. I always kind of interpreted it to really similar with like the Emma Frost thing, where it's like he's not pushing his powers to the ultimate limit, because what he can do now is he can like literally shatter into like molecules and rebuild himself.
Right. Which is what he does in Astonishing Iceman over and over and over.
Yeah. And then he creates the little clones, the golems too, right? And that I think was the
like the start of it, the kickstart.
Yes. And that's where that leads. I mean, I guess it's a secondary mutation, but there is an explanation from Bobby. Actually, I think he's talking to his dad in that 2017 run, where he's talking about like the reason his powers did that is because he wanted to.
He can turn into vapor. Is what he said.
He wants to be invisible. He doesn't want to be seen. So
crazy.
It's complicated because secondary mutations are they've been retconned and unretconned and re-retconned a million times as to why they happen.
Sure.
And I think that with the Bobby Drake one, it's very much a psychological thing. Yeah. Where for other mutants that hasn't been the case.
It's only that when it happens, they're like, I think because secondary mutations were starting to happen to a bunch of mutants. Yeah. That they're like, oh, it must be one. So it has been written as it was a secondary mutation, but like it kind of isn't.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I don't think it is.
Because he starts as more Snow when he first in Silver Age, like issues 1, 2, 3, whatever. And it takes a while for him to be able to like literally turn to ice, like translucent ice. Before, I think it was just like a covering of ice. Like you couldn't see through him. It was just like ice over his body.
It's like snow almost.
So now it's like that ice form is actually something more. Right. Instead. Yeah. I guess.
Like he's ice all the way through.
Right. Yeah. Right. So.
Which has been the case for a while though. Yeah. Like even before then.
So I guess that kind of leads to him being more of an Omega level mutant.
He is, actually, I think.
You're right. No, yeah, he is. But I'm saying, like, I think that is the road we took.
Yes, for sure. That's why I don't always consider it a secondary mutation. Because, like, to me, it's like he didn't secondary mutate into an Omega level mutant. He's just getting better at controlling his powers. Yeah. And therefore, like, he realizes he doesn't have a limit where he thought he did before.
Which is crazy because, like, he even says, like, earlier on, all I could do was basically throw snowballs. Yeah. And now look at all the things he can do.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. I mean, I like it. I like the power creep over 80 years. No, it's not 80.
And, you know, I think, like,
60 years.
It makes sense, right? Yeah. Because, of course, they would get better. They do nothing but practice and refine their powers and use in combat. Like, to me...
He also feels like the guy who isn't dedicated enough to like learn how to use his powers a bunch.
Absolutely.
So of course he'd be like, wait, I could do that? Okay.
It also feels like, you know, he's like, he needs these shocks. Like he needs to get stabbed by Black Tom Cassidy and like in order for him to force him to push his powers to the limit, because otherwise he's happy where he is, because, you know, like if you take nothing else away from it, Bobby Drake has spent a lot of time trying to be less insecure. And sometimes he's successful and sometimes he's not. And like especially with his powers, you know, he doesn't push it to the limit.
It's interesting we can have that much to say on the quote unquote class clown of the X-Men.
This is the benefit of comic book storytelling. Yeah. Because you've got to fill the pages. And like you said, it's like, you know, 40, 50 years or whatever.
It's been 60.
60, right? Yeah. You'll get around to everybody if they're still in the comic books at
if they're interesting enough.
Right.
You know,
or you make them.
Yeah, you make them interesting. All that to say, the Iceman in these movies is not that.
No. I mean...
He's not even quipping.
He's not funny. We've talked about this. The Iceman in the movies are not really funny. he has like a weird like aggro thing with Wolverine. He's just like kind of jealous. He's like really into his girlfriend.
I mean, it's a very teenager thing to do, but it's
is.
Like there are other characters you could have done that with.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they wanted Iceman because he's the original.
Yeah,
X-Men.
absolutely. I understand why they use him. He should have been a little bit more of the comic relief.
I think so too. I think he would have really benefited from that. But there isn't really any comic relief in these movies. So
Wolverine gets a couple of.
Yeah,
because he's the cool guy.
Yeah, but it's not the
he's
same.
He's too cool for school.
It's not the same as like real comic relief.
Right. Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think that's about it, though.
Oh, man. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Tasha.
I'm producer James.
And we'll see you for the next 10.